Welcome back to the Real Recovery Show. We are every week on Friday at noon, and you can catch all of our episodes by going to themeetingspace.com, where they're all listed. We like to have a variety of topics to introduce you to different modalities and tools that you can use, as well as hear people's stories on how they use different things to help them to heal as well. I know it's helped me a lot just doing these shows to learn a lot about what's available to people. And as the owner of the meeting space, it helps me to know how I can help steer people to things that may be more appropriate for them where they're at in their coming out of addiction or whatever they're dealing with. So, so today's episode is going to be on smart recovery. And if you haven't heard about it, or you have heard about it, but you don't know much about it, stay tuned. It's very interesting what they've been doing. A little step back for a second. I am a firm believer, even though I do believe that for myself that everything is either blocking or accessing my own internal connection with a higher power. There are certain beliefs I've had, ideas I've run on, identifications, and behaviors I've learned that have kept me, no matter how much I've believed in my higher power or have listened to or tried to listen to or hear an inner guidance, some of these are very difficult to break. And when I've said to people, you know, I'm an addict, it's because I have an addictive mindset that I could, if I have certain thought processes activated, do something addictively. If I don't have the tools to be comfortable in my own skin and to feel more empowered and to handle one situation at a time and learn how to do that for me, because everybody's different, then my default is then I might as well just go check out, just go do a thing, I need a break or whatever like that. And you don't even have to be necessarily somebody who's bottomed from alcohol or drug use to have this kind of conditioning so destructive in your life. Our society, in our society, you'll see people on TV or even at work go, hey, today was a really tough day. Let's go get some drinks after. And so it's always like, oh man, let's go do this. So we have to let go. We have to have fun and we have to cope. And alcohol and drugs has been, even in our society, a reward or a coping skill. But as we know, it takes something. For every time that we turn to something, a substance or a behavior, it takes away from our own innate ability to be able to be free and to be empowered and to have healthy relationships and to be more true to ourselves and to succeed and to have our own self-actualization. And so wherever you are at in the spectrum, whether it's a behavior that you want to stop or an addiction that you feel has really been taking you down, we know when there's something that's not working in our own life because there's something that just doesn't feel right for us and we're having some negative consequences that are not acceptable to us. And honestly, that's all you need to hit a bottom, is to get to a place where there's some aspect of your life that's unacceptable to you. And so smart recovery is a great tool. It's and we're going to go into it in detail about how it can help anybody as a program that somebody does solely or as an adjunct to 12-step recovery or any other kind of program for recovery. And so today we're joined with Tay and and we're also joined with Ebony Jewel Sears, who's a certified alcohol and drug abuse counselor intern. She's a certified peer recovery support specialist supervisor, a certified national smart recovery facilitator and South Nevada local coordinator, and a certified Nevada veterans advocate. So thank you so much for joining us. And we're also joined here today with David Nooks, who's a certified peer recovery support specialist at Foundation for Recovery, which we've had an interview with Foundation for Recovery in the beginning, so you can go see an episode on that. And so I'm really excited about this conversation. It's going to be quite enlightening. A little bit about Smart Recovery. It started in 1994 as a small nonprofit. They had about 40 group meetings and now have about thousands of face-to-face meetings all around the world. It's free of charge. And this program offers specific tools and techniques for each of the points, building upon strengths, building and maintaining motivation, coping with urges, managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and living a balanced life. And those are the 4 points that are the focus of Smart Recovery. People using a SMART program, they move away from addictions and towards satisfying lives. They learn tools and techniques for a self-directed change. And people can benefit from improved tools such as scientific knowledge of addiction recovery evolves, no labels, nobody identifies as an alcoholic or a drug addict necessarily. It's all so much more focused on what the behavior is that is creating the discord in your life, and we're going to get into that as well. So at first, what we like to do is we like to have a little bit of backstory as to why this came into the person's life and how it's been helpful to them. And then we'll get into what it's all about and how it's helpful. So we'll start off with you, Ebony. You could share a little bit about yourself.
Well, a little bit about myself. I got introduced to Smart Recovery. I was just Googling recovery programs, and I came across Smart. So I started going to Smart in-person meetings, and I really liked the psychologically based tools. Mm-hmm. So I just continued to use them for my recovery. I kind of white-knuckled it for about a year and changed my environment, thinking that would change everything.
Right.
And nothing changed other than the place that I was at. And I realized I had to really start working on myself if I wanted to have a life at all. So that's what brought me into the Smart Recovery rooms.
I think everybody, no matter what the addiction or the affliction, initially thinks it has to be where I'm at and who I'm with. Mm-hmm. Like no matter what, oh, that's just the wrong guy. That's just the wrong girl. This is the wrong job. Yeah. This is the wrong state. You know what? This is the wrong planet.
For me, it was location. I moved 30 different times.
Wow.
And
so you're satisfied that doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And I brought myself with me each and every place. Mm-hmm. So.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. And you're a facilitator of Smart Recovery. Okay, perfect. And David?
Yeah, David Nooks. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I work at Foundation for Recovery. And we're like the training hub for Nevada, the recovery training hub for Nevada. We do a lot of different trainings. And we decided to start doing Smart Recovery and offering Smart Recovery live meetings right after COVID. I met Bob Vickery a little bit before COVID, and we had discussed it with our program director at the time, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. And then COVID happened, so then it wasn't such a great idea. And then we picked it back up, and I was the first person to take the training, the Smart Recovery training, and I was like, oh man, another training. Okay, I'll do it. All right, because I wanted to be a good employee and I wanted to learn. And about halfway through the training, I've got a background in another group, and so a pretty deep background in that group. So I was like, okay, well, and about midway through the training, the light bulb came on. I'm like, well, these guys are onto something.
Yeah.
And fast forward to now, and a couple hundred facilitator meetings under my belt. Smart has found a home at FFR, and I feel very at home facilitating the meetings. I think it's a great tool in addition to whatever else you're doing.
That's great. How many meetings do you guys have for Smart Recovery at Foundation for Recovery?
We offer 4 in-person meetings per week.
Okay.
We are, Mondays and Tuesdays, 1 to 2 p.m. Mm-hmm. And I do the AM meetings on Thursdays and Saturdays. Thursdays, 9 a.m., Saturdays, 10:30 a.m.
It's interesting you said that before COVID, because that's when I found out about it too. And then somebody was saying that they wanted to do that at the meeting space, and then something happened, and we had COVID, and then that was it. Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. So we're definitely going to be having it now, because we're going to make this happen. But anyway, so one of the things, as I mentioned, that's so interesting about Smart Recovery is that there's no label. There's when you go into a 12-step program, you usually are encouraged strongly to say that, hi, I'm an alcoholic, my name is Lisa, or hi, I'm a drug addict, my name is Lisa, or whatever. And of course, nobody has to, but that is the norm of a 12-step meeting, is to acknowledge, is part of the first step, is to say that, I have a problem with such and such and blah, blah, blah. But with Smart Recovery, nobody introduces themselves in the meeting and says that I am an alcoholic. So do people introduce themselves in a meeting before they share? Like, is it how much different is it from?
Well, they definitely introduce themselves, but they don't have to tell you what their maladaptive behavior or anything is. We just go by our names or
do people do
our
it
alias.
though? Because I'm sure there's lots of people that are in 12-step recovery who also go to Smart Recovery. So do they have that kind of conditioning, and then they say their name, and then I'm an addict or something?
I personally rarely hear that.
Okay.
I hear it all the time.
Do you? I would feel like it's a different, like each meeting probably has its own little culture to it.
Right.
Right. It takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of the pressure off. When I emphasize that at the beginning of the meetings and say that we really discourage the use of labels, and just at least for an hour out of the week, if this is the only meeting you go to, you don't have to be an alcoholic. You don't have to be an addict in the meeting. You can just be a person in recovery. You can
Yeah. That's great. So nobody needs to say that they have that specific thing then, or that to even qualify to even be there, they could just come.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. That's great.
And people work on all different things.
Right.
Some of the meetings, I do a national meeting where we work on people with procrastination problems, perfectionism, codependence.
Yeah.
So it just really depends.
So would you have a mix of people all working on different things in the same meeting?
Yes.
Isn't Celebrate Recovery
That's
kind of
what
like that too?
It's exactly like that's how in Celebrate Recovery you don't identify as the affliction, the maladaptive behavior. You identify as
somebody who's struggling with that.
Well, first you identify as a believer in Christ, but then you identify as whatever you don't even have to say what you're struggling with. You can say what you've recovered from. You can say what you are working on currently, and that could be sarcasm or procrastination or.
It's very interesting that there's this correlation. That's wonderful. I like to find what the commonalities are about everything. I find it interesting because the truth is, even in my own recovery, because I had to get to a place where, for myself, I defined what it means to me to say that I'm an alcoholic. And for years, I said I'm an alcoholic addict. I said it because I had all these different things that I was dealing with, and I wanted nobody in my mind to think that they were off the hook until I was legitimately past it. I had food addiction, sex addiction, workaholism, and if I was only at a meeting or a program or anything that focused on alcohol, everybody else thought that, maybe we don't have a problem in these other areas. It's like, well, the real problem is deeper. It's the conditioning, it's the disconnect and stuff like that. So yeah, I like that a lot. Anyway, and so you're focusing instead on as more of a behavioral thing. And so what are some of the tools? I know that you guys use cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and you use REBT, which is rational emotive behavioral therapy. And then you also incorporate mindfulness and relaxation techniques. Do you incorporate relaxation techniques in the meeting itself, or in just the literature that people can use?
Well, we can. It really just depends. Mindfulness and relaxation will never be the focus of a meeting. Sometimes we'll put it in at the end, especially if there's been a lot of emotions that have come up in a meeting to, settle everyone down before they leave, and just to have a sense of calm after you've spilled all your guts to your new best friends in the room. But
right, because some of it could be triggering.
Yeah, definitely that.
So in your facilitator training, you learn how to facilitate a relaxation technique or some sort of meditation or something to bring everybody back, or?
So most of the time you would have to come up with that on your own. It's a really small section of the of the handbook in general, where it talks about meditation.
So is it more like a group therapy session? That's kind of what it sounds like, as far as having the facilitator, having the CBT techniques, or the REBT techniques. Would you say it's more like a group session than
when people share? Do you then, because there's crosstalk, right? So in this type of environment, when somebody shares, does then the facilitator speak to what they're saying, or do other people in the group speak to what they're saying? Is there the application of these therapeutic techniques on it, or
not so much the application of the techniques? Like, we're not going to. Okay, so we can readily apply REBT to those
You're not
run
gonna
through the
therapize
tools
them,
that we
right.
work.
okay,
You know, so if someone comes up with an emotion, a strong feeling, we look for the activating event.
okay,
Say, well, maybe we could work an ABC on this one,
okay.
and it would be a great time to introduce.
And an
a tool.
ABC is?
ABC, well, it's a pretty deep tool.
So
What does the ABC stand
It's
for?
the
Other than the
activating event, your
Okay.
beliefs around that event, and then the consequences
Okay.
of those beliefs.
Okay.
And
So
then
it's
you get
ABC.
into the D and the E, so it's really an ABCDE, but at first
Okay.
we'll say ABC.
Okay.
And then we get to the D and the E where
Okay,
the
so
solution-
as you go, then you can start recognizing what kinds of tools you feel could be recommended in the moment, but it's also concurrently teaching them how to use these tools, right?
Right.
On their own. And so now you guys are all doing it in a group environment. As they're learning and sharing, they're seeing how things can be applied, right?
Right.
And getting tools. That's very interesting.
Exactly.
Huh.
And the key is to get them to it's their meeting.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of driving the bus, you know, and maybe throwing a couple breadcrumbs out there and sort of guiding the meeting, if that makes any sense. Not really running the meeting, like kind of guiding it along.
So it doesn't get off topic.
Yeah.
Right. It's all peer led.
Yeah.
So if a peer has something to say, of course, we'll let them say it first. And if we see maybe any holes or anything that hasn't been addressed, then we'll come as a facilitator and, maybe answer a question. But it's always peer led.
That's really interesting. That is really, really interesting. I love that. We have some programs that we're starting at the meeting space that for different ages that we're going to be, but we're having a counselor come in there to be part of it, to give tools to be able to help as an adjunct too. So it may be something to incorporate smart recovery into. That's very fascinating. So if that ends up happening, this is where it started. Here. But anyway, so when people do come, is there no measurement of how long they've been coming? Any kind of like in other types of recovery programs, there's medallions people get and birthdays people celebrate and all that other stuff. How do people acknowledge their own accomplishments in it or milestones in it? Is there anything to that end, or is it just very
No.
kind of that's what you do outside of here?
No coins, no celebrations. Some people do count days, but that's just them. You never ask anyone how long they've been in recovery, or of course, if they do mention it, we of course acknowledge that and congratulate them for that amount of time, but we don't count days in smart recovery.
Interesting. Very cool. And so how does a meeting start? Do you have a whole format of how you start a meeting, and what's a general kind of, maybe you don't know it by heart, but something that you say to open up, to set the tone for a meeting, to let people know?
Well, we just talk about that this is a meeting that we don't use labels, that anyone can be here, whether or not you think addiction is a disease or not. Everyone is welcome to their own thoughts. And there's an emphasis to understand that SMART is about self-management. So we emphasize that, and about having patience with yourself. And then also letting people know that they can be a part of this meeting for as long as they find it helpful. It isn't something that they have to do for their entire life. If they think that the meeting, they've gotten everything that they need to get out of the meetings and it's no longer helpful, then you're welcome to stop coming, and no one will think any differently of you. So that's really what the intro.
And is there
talks
any
about.
internal support system of people getting each other's phone numbers, if it's just not happen naturally?
I always encourage people to get phone numbers, because it's better. It's always two heads are better than one, especially if you're doing 4 eyes. Yeah, right. And they're better than 4 eyes are better than one. And if you're working trying to work a smart tool by yourself, maybe it's not going to work out as well as you thought it would, or as well as it did in the meeting. Well, that worked out great when we did the ABC, or we did a cost benefit analysis at the last meeting. Let me try and do it. And a lot of times people will come back to the meeting. Man, I tried to do a CBA, Dave, and I got stuck. And it's like, okay, well, why don't you give me a call next time? Or did you get some phone numbers?
I could see how this could also be a really great tool, not just as an adjunct to going to 12-step meetings, etc., but also like to go and get personal one-on-one recovery, and to work on with these types of modalities, and then to go to groups and to be able to kind of practice and to see what comes up. And if something's like heavier or something, then they could go and even bring it to their therapist and they could talk about it there. I mean, it's just interesting how the more open our minds are, the more we see how we can benefit from our own little recipe, if you will, for what we need personally to heal. I never did just one thing in my recovery, and I can't credit one thing with my recovery. I don't know if it's because I'm a Gemini. I don't know if it's because I had so many addictions, but I also suffered from an incredible level of PTSD, and so I had a lot of intra and interpersonal issues, and to be nice about it, and so that forced me to maintain an open mind in my recovery, which I'm grateful for. But sometimes I could see people, because they did one thing that really helped them, be so close-minded to anything else, and I find that a shame, because just because one thing has helped does not mean that nothing else will. That things can be compatible with it, and that having an open mind and being true to yourself is such an important thing. And that is also one of the most important things, because when we're in addiction or in checking out behavior, it is anywhere but here, anybody but me, whether we move 30 times or not. It is. And so to learn things on how to catch ourselves in the way we're thinking and our behaviors, but also to learn to be in our bodies, to be in this present moment, and how to do that without losing our shit, and no matter what you need to do to get to that. I see this as a benefit as well when somebody does go to a 12-step meeting and they have some traumas around anything that sounds anything religious, even though when somebody gives 12-step recovery enough of a chance, they find out that it has all the wide room for them to find their own understanding of their own higher power. People can have what I would consider religious abuse without having what maybe society would consider religious abuse, meaning they can have religious abuse without it having to do specifically with a church or a member of a church. It could just be, for me, what made me question everything was growing up with one parent who was uber religious and one parent who was atheist, sometimes agnostic, depending on what was going on in his life. And what the stuff that went on in my family made me really not want to have anything to do with religion for a while, and didn't want to have anything to do with the word God. I had to kind of go through the back door of my own interpretations. And so to be able to go and to have these tools to, either while going to a 12-step meeting, go also to Smart Recovery, or go to Smart Recovery and see. But ultimately, it's going to get us back to looking at ourselves, looking at our thinking, looking at our behavior, and back into this present moment, into being true to ourselves. And I think the biggest affliction behind all the other afflictions is the self-dishonesty and the behaviors that are out of alignment with, on a deeper level, what we really want, right? And so everything on the level of the details of it looks so different, but I feel like there's many paths to the same place of healing, and to thine own self be true. And I love that it's peer-based. I love that it's, this is your program. This is your recovery. And we're here to empower you. And then as a facilitator in your meetings, you get something out of it every time too, because it's a meeting. It's a group for you, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
definitely a give take.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It keeps you focused. It keeps you learning things, the insights people get maybe, right?
Right. And I love working the ABC exercise with someone that comes in with an incredible emotional upset, like you were saying, and then you can help them work through it. And at the end, they're smiling and they're saying, okay, I guess life isn't so bad in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah, that's rewarding.
And it's really rewarding, and it's somebody else. We're all working the tool together,
Right.
And they're like, well, I never really looked at it from that perspective. And then they come to the D, which is where they question that emotional upset. They question it and reframe it and into an E, which is an effective new way of thinking about that.
So give an example of that. Just an example of somebody comes in, Sally comes in and she's out of her mind. And she's there and she's saying, this is going on, this is horrible, I can't stand this, da-da-da.
Well, that would be the activating event, that something happened, whatever happened to get her to this state. And the belief would probably be something like,
I can't handle it.
I can't handle it, and when I can't handle it, then therefore I must drink.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Sure.
So, and then the consequence of that is perhaps they relapse or they thought about relapsing.
Or they obsess about it.
Or they obsess about it, right? And then you go and you ask those questions that dispute that belief. So is it true that just because you're upset with your husband that you have to drink? Where is it written that him making you mad equals a Bud
And
Light?
hasn't there been many times when
Right.
you've had a fight with your husband and you didn't
And you
drink?
didn't drink.
And there
So
you
isn't
go.
it possible that it's not true?
And
Yes.
now you're questioning your own.
Right.
Right.
So that's
Your
actually
inspiration,
exactly the technique that I use in my own healing. I always, when I have a thought, the more I believe in a thought, the more energy it's going to have, the more of a reactive energy I'm going to have to a thing, right? So there's
Right.
this saying in recovery, when it's hysterical, it's historical, right? So if there's a charge and it's written all over my face and I'm so uncomfortable on my own skin, then I know, okay, what am I running on? What is this? What's going on? And I ask, what is the thought that I'm running on right now? And then I say, is it possible that there's something wrong with this thinking? Is it possible it's something that it's not true? And I go deeper. I ask myself, I'm of an open mind, because that's what we do. We run on these closed loops, these ideas in our mind, and we don't ever question them. We just literally believe the thought because we have the feeling energy attached to it. And we think, and because we've packed it in there from past experience, that we think we learned something. And then next thing you know, away we go. And in it, we think, I have to do this. I have to leave this person. I have to react this way. I have to drink. I have to do this drug. I have to have the cigarette. I have to, because this is what I'm trained to believe. If this happens, then this. If this happens, then this. If this happens, then this. And so as long as there's a way to be willing to be wrong and to question these ideas, the mind then gets restored to sanity, because it's willing to say, you know what, maybe just even to put the littlest question mark at the end of that. Because sometimes if I tell myself that's not true, I will start getting somebody whose sole job in my mind is to keep the data in folders to go, excuse me, do you not remember what this person did and that person did and da-da-da-da? It's like, you know what? Isn't it possible that it's not true? It's just questioning these ideas and being able to say, well, what could you do instead of this? What have you done instead of this? And it changes the wiring neurologically in your mind.
Right.
And the next time you're in that same situation, you may still feel like you want to do the thing because that wiring is still there, that programming is still there, but there's something else there that's been reintroduced or introduced into the mind that says, but there's also another way of thinking as well.
Right, we're programmed for certain responses, and she just did another tool, and it's called DIBS, disrupting irrational beliefs.
Okay.
And we talked
DIBS,
about
I like
IVs the wording. We were talking with Dr. Joe and Mike about the wording of that. I think you were on that meeting. We have a weekly facilitator meeting, and with the actual wording and irrational coming from a facilitator. If I'm telling you that you have an
you're going to get a
belief,
strong reaction.
and then
Who are you to
maybe
say?
unhelpful. Yeah, right.
The unhelpful belief.
Unhelpful.
You
So I always say
telling
unhelpful.
somebody who is being irrational, that they're being irrational will get you way more irrationality.
Right.
I promise you.
Yes.
That's like,
That's my ex-wife.
That's like that's like lighting a match next to like a fuse, just like
But
about to blow.
unhelpful, that I can wrap my mind around.
Yeah.
Unhelpful.
Yeah. Is that serving you?
Yeah.
Is that in alignment? It's like when people say think through the drink or stop the train. Take a moment and pause for a second and go, sure, you could do that, but then then this will happen, and then you don't know what's going to happen with that. How about maybe we pause and we say, what else? Maybe you don't want that end result, so maybe you don't really need to do this. What else could you do?
And work from the sea out.
That's wonderful. I see so much how working together all these tools can help a person to change the programming in their mind. And it's interesting too, because you don't have to have grown up with people who had addiction. You could just have been around people who have the type of thinking that holds judgment, who has this if-then kind of thinking, like, if this happens, then this is what I'll do, or this is what someone should do, or whatever. And the programming that can carry from generation to generation to generation to generation, whether somebody even picks up a drink or not, is so ingrained. The thinking is so plain as the nose on your face that nobody questions it. The emperor's naked as far as everyone's concerned, and there's no way we could do anything else, And so recovery should always be infused with, looking for the all or nothings, the I can'ts, the nevers,
the cognitive distortions. That's what we talk about a lot.
The generalities, the things that smoke and mirror it, and you can't actually see what's really going on.
You sound like a great SMART facilitator.
Oh, I should take the class. I'm actually very interested in this. I might actually do that because it's very much in alignment with what I value in my own recovery, is to question these ideas that we've been running on. I mean, I'm no fool. I see my whole family tree, and it's riddled with stuff. My entire family tree. Like we used to joke that if you leaned against it, a bottle or something will fall on you. Because it's just... But nobody knows what they don't know, and then this is what keeps us stuck, right?
Yeah.
I know that you used a very general issue that could come up, but I'm curious about this because the people of Smart Recovery, the facilitators, aren't necessarily CADCs. I mean, I know you are, but if somebody came in and was like, I want to kill myself.
What happens?
Okay. Well, we're not trained to deal with that type of conversation. So what we'll do is refer them to a therapist or the 1-800 number for for self-harm or whatever it is. And then talk to them about what's going on while we're trying to get them that information.
So you'll allow them to still be in the group, but you'll just give them the other information?
Right. And we don't necessarily encourage them to talk about what the problem is, but...
Because it's so heated.
But encouraging them to talk in general until we can get them that information.
That's great.
Well, no, yeah, I agree. And I've had the luxury of facilitating meetings at my job, where I can say, hey, I'll pull them aside and say, hey, look, why don't you come into my office after the meeting and we'll talk a little bit more about it and see if I can get you referred out to some help that you need.
So I have a question. So let's say, because this is all about being self-honest and short-circuiting some of these, all these ideas and behaviors that we were running on. What if somebody is, so I do believe everyone lives in some aspect of self-denial, and then some of us live in a lot of aspect of self-denial, especially when we are, with PTSD or going through, major levels of addiction or long-term habitual behavior, because a lot of this stuff was, this is who I need to be okay. And this is what everybody's done to be okay, and I'm just modeling it, or this is what my survival skills. So it's on a deeply rooted thing, and it's not necessarily where a person can be that honest about that thing in the moment. What happens when somebody comes to Smart Recovery and maybe either overtly, like they're aware of it as a behavior that they are lying, or that they are like everyone else also in self-denial, and they're like not willing to be open enough to find out what the truth really is for themselves in that moment. I mean, it's all their own program anyway, and they're going to go at the pace that they need to. But what happens when somebody is lying is one of their behavioral maladaptive thingies?
Well,
everybody lies to themselves. Everyone in recovery is great at lying to themselves first, and then everyone else.
Those are called affirmations.
Right. It goes back to the question.
That's what happened when I first started using affirmations. This part of me said, lies! All lies!
Right?
What are you trying to do to me?
Was it that person in the mirror?
That's where all the affirmations were.
That's the same one that was talking to me, too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
So it goes back to what he was talking about with the disputing irrational beliefs. Is this belief helpful or unhelpful? You know, is it helpful for you to believe this that leads to this consequence? You don't have any friends now, or no one trusts you, or whatever the story might be. Is that helpful to what you want in your life? And then we have another tool, the hierarchy of values.
I was just thinking of that.
Yeah, where you list your 5 highest values in your life and do these 2 things match? And it kind of, you do some motivational interviewing to get them to see, here's your values, here's this maladaptive behavior, no matter what it is.
Right, you say you want a relationship.
Right.
You say you want a relationship, but you're doing things to guard up and alienate yourself.
Right.
You know, and is this in alignment with what one of your values are?
Right.
Exactly. So the HOV is one of the strongest tools in smart recovery. I think everyone on earth should do a quarterly HOV, hierarchy of values.
Okay,
And,
a hierarchy of values.
And you just sit down with a notebook. I tell people, take 15 minutes and a notebook and a pen. You're worth it. You know, it's for you. And be honest with yourself. And just shoot down everything you value in your life. Everything.
Right.
And distill that down into the 5 main things. And more often than not, you're going to find that your addictive or maladaptive behavior is not on that list, and it's actually blocking you from the things that are on that list.
Yeah.
And people sometimes have a life.
That's ultimately can speed up a bottom, you know, whereas we can go for a long time believing that a problem is not that bad, you know, and it's not really hurting that many people, and for some reason people just don't want to this with me or whatever like that. But, you know, I feel like when you can do that, when you can sit and write down what your values are and where you're at, if your behaviors are in alignment with that. I mean, I've had to have my own just on food alone because I was a model and a stripper for all of the 90s and a bulimic. So I had both of these things. I had food addiction, and then I had using my body to make money, and the two did not want to be in the same room together. So like when I was in one headspace, because I believed in the moment, I did not have any other way to handle whatever was coming up for me in that moment. Food would be my biggest go-to when else would fail. And I mean, you put alcohol, drugs, everything else on the table, and food was my default if I couldn't have anything else for sure. And but then I would be like, now you have to work out harder, and this is stupid, and why did you do that, and da-da-da-da, because it is a lie that bulimics are thin. That's anorexia. But yeah, like really, like, you know, looking at your behavior and saying, you know, there are 2 things going on here that are evidence of a split mind that is totally not on the same page for the highest good, you know, and when we can recognize that for ourselves, whatever that looks like for ourselves, you know, if we have certain behavior where maybe we're controlling and we're needing to control everything, and yet we want peace and we want to relax and we want health and we don't want to have a heart attack, it's like we might want to look at how some of the things that are going on in our life do not actually go along with our overall desire of what we really want. You know, to say that we want trust in in a partner, and to say we want them to know that they're special to us and important to us, but we do very selfish things, and we lie, and we do things behind their back, or we don't treat that what they're saying. We have 2 things that are out of accord with each other, right? And so that's beautiful. That's a great tool because it's like a check-in. You know, no judgment, no shame. Just like I go, okay, where am I at in this? Kind of like a progress, not perfection. But can I be honest with myself? Where am I really at? If I say I want these things, but yet I'm still doing these things, there must be something that I'm believing that's still giving this value to me.
Right.
Because it's totally not getting me this.
Right.
Right?
And it empowers them to put their recovery in their own hands.
Yeah.
And take some time, not in the group, not in the meeting, but they can take time on their own to do it on their own. And it dovetails into a couple more tools like journaling. I'm a big journaling guy. And
that's wonderful.
Put your recovery and, write down, what am I doing to get to those things? What are some of my goals? And then goal setting. And then if I'm doing something that's blocking me from the things that I value, maybe I can pull out some paper and do a cost-benefit analysis, which is, I think, one of the other really strong tools.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And great to do in a meeting format. It's awesome.
So is there somebody that helps you look at this stuff? Because, if I look at my hierarchy and I think, my relationship is the most important thing in my life, but I believe that these things that I'm doing are what are keeping my relationship together, and they're the addictive behavior. How do I...
Right, for example, let's say to avoid conflict, she doesn't want to tell somebody something, but that other person feels like they need her to tell us that thing, So in that moment, she thinks she's doing the thing that's for the relationship. The other person doesn't necessarily, so there's like a disconnect for that.
Well, now there's an ABC. You can work an ABC on that one. And that would be the activating event.
Yeah, but how would you know that?
Or it could be the consequences of
the
event,
handbook.
Depending.
By going through
Just
the handbook.
Workbook, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to take a look at it.
Definitely.
You guys on air.
And it's all about going through the handbook on your own and then coming to the meetings for support. So the meetings aren't the most important
so
thing.
the handbook's like a
Smart.
workbook.
Yeah.
It's a workbook.
Oh, that's
so your
wonderful.
program is the handbook. So the meetings are just for support. I know people who are part of SMART who've never been to SMART meetings, but they use the handbook religiously. So
yeah, but who helps them go through it?
You mean where 12-step recovery there's a sponsor?
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
in 12-step recovery, you would find out what your character defects are because your sponsor tells you, right?
And then Celebrate Recovery, you do that with what?
A sponsor.
A sponsor?
Yeah. And then in therapy, you do it with a therapist. And so I'm just curious, how would someone that's not trained know, well, this is my behavior that's ruining this relationship. This is when I need to do an ABC on it. How would you just know that? Just reading a book.
You would know that you have an activating event because you're upset, right? You know that you're upset. And what do I do when I'm upset? I go and I do an ABC on that. And then you look at those beliefs.
Okay. Are
these beliefs helpful for you, or are they hindering you from getting what you want out of life? And then you do this again and again, you do an ABC every day or anytime you have an emotional upset.
Yeah, I wouldn't think you would need somebody else to do that with. There are tools for you to look. You could share it with other people.
Secondarily, but you can absolutely do it by yourself.
Yeah.
And the way that the handbook is designed is that it teaches you how to self-manage, which is the whole point of recovery training. Yeah.
That's great. I'm all
If that
about
makes
tools.
sense.
Yeah, for sure. So I know that Smart Recovery doesn't consider addiction a disease itself. It just considers it because to me, when I think of a disease, I don't think of just the chemical part of it being a disease. For me, I consider mental illness. Which nobody really likes those words. There's a lot of heaviness to it. But I consider that when we are maladjusted, when we have this programming and then we have these reactions, I feel like I have PTSD. I consider that a disease, a dis-ease. I consider that. I feel like it's something to heal from. I feel like I definitely have sickness, instead of health in a certain area. But Smart Recovery takes a very it's not a disease, kind of. Or it doesn't take any
stance.
It doesn't at all. That's right. You're right. It doesn't take any stance. Whichever idea works for you.
Exactly.
Okay, that's right. That's
they
right.
leave it up to they leave it up to you, and they explain that, they go over that. I think maybe a half a page in the handbook, and they go over it, and they leave the ball in your court the whole time.
Okay, and then for the people in someone's life who is also been, because when somebody's dealing with something that they find doesn't work for them, they also have, it affects everybody, right? So families, friends, there's a program in Smart Recovery for the family and friends of somebody who's going through something as well. And like, so with 12-step recovery, there's like Al-Anon, Nar-Anon. For sex addicts, it's S-Anon and on and on. But so what does that look like, the family and friends? Is it just, it's another kind of meeting that people can go to? Is that more online?
Smart Family and Friends. Smart's got a huge online presence.
Okay.
I think any online meeting, national meeting, is going to have 30 to 150 people.
Right.
Online.
And does it use just the same tools, but it allows
Smart
for
Family
people?
and Friends.
Yeah, like does it use the same tools that are in the handbook for people just dealing with their own issues?
There are some tools that are a little different. Some are added, some are taken out of the Family and Friends Handbook.
Okay.
But the main focus is for the person to look at their behavior and their reactions to we call them their loved one, so the person going through recovery. And they would do an ABC too if they had an emotional upset.
Right, for sure. That's what I thought. I figured it would be a lot of the same things, because even in Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, they're told that initially you'll go there because you think that you're there because somebody else is drinking or using, right? But then you find out after you call the person your qualifier, but then you find out that really that you're there and your own thinking and your own reaction and all that stuff that you're the one that has your own stuff that you need to look at, the codependency, etc. So that's wonderful.
In Celebrate Recovery too, they always say that the person that's there to support is their favorite person in the room, because even if they don't know that they have issues, they'll give them some. Like it's
That's hilarious.
You'll end up in recovery too.
That's hilarious. Well, this is the merry-go-round of denial. I mean, the family system keeps all the dis-ease going. It does. I mean, whenever somebody comes into the recovery store and they want help for somebody else, I go into two different headspaces. I go into the part of it that's like, oh yeah, I'll help you maybe get the book or the thing that could help the other person. But whilst I'm doing that, let me listen to what's going on with you, because you might benefit from this meditation book or whatever like that, or maybe go into this other program or something as well. And oftentimes that's the first they even heard about something like that. I'm very delicate about it. I just go, okay, well, oftentimes there are things that happen in our own life that we get into relationships or stay in relationships that are dysfunctional or unhealthy because of certain learned things that make that acceptable and, okay. And so, you're a fish in water who is now swimming in similar waters, and it's different people, but there's things that you've learned and that you're used to from somewhere else that make this okay. This behavior, and while you're enabling and stuff like that. And so we can all benefit. We can all benefit because there's the interpersonal and the intrapersonal parts of any kind of addiction or behavior. It's we support each other in our healing, and we support each other in our sickness. We do it. We can codependently co-sign anything. And so there's also a program from Smart Recovery called Inside Out, and they go into, it's a correctional institutional program developed with the National Institute on Drug Abuse. It's used in hundreds of prisons, and they focus on addictive and criminal behavior. I find that so amazing. I was telling Tay this on the way to the radio station that, because I know that, there's hospitals and institutions, program that a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, they go and they take meetings into prisons, etc. But it's very difficult to get into some of them and to be able to keep having meetings there, etc.
And get literature there.
Take literature.
Yeah, literature is like the biggest.
It's a whole thing. And so the fact that Smart Recovery is more science-based probably gives it a little bit more, and I'm assuming stuff here, so this is just my opinion, which just take what you like and leave the rest. But I could see how that would be more acceptable, something like that, to go into, to have a program specifically geared towards not just addictive but criminal behavior, so that people don't end up coming back to the prison. It's like it's very much in their favor to allow for a program to help people learn tools, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's evidence-based, and I think it's been shown to reduce recidivism in a lot of different ways.
Yeah,
I could so see this too, because sometimes people learn how to be a criminal in jail.
Yeah.
You know, like
Well, it's
sometimes
finishing
you.
school.
Yes, exactly. It's like, you did that. How did you do that? Oh, that's what I did wrong. Oh my God.
But you
Okay.
figure county, well, yeah, right. So county is like high school, and then, state prison is more like, grad school.
Yeah. And so, and it's, you can become institutionalized, right? You can have that kind of thinking. I've seen Shawshank Redemption. I know what I'm talking about. And so, but you can end up with that kind of thinking that makes you feel like you might be willing to tell yourself some lies, like, I can't live outside of prison, right? But you would go, is that true, right? And I don't have coping skills to be able to handle life outside and getting a job and whatever like that. And so by even maybe being introduced to smart recovery in prison, learning certain tools, having certain shifts in their perception, right? Some empowerment. Now they go and even help other people because it's very peer-based and everybody's taking responsibility. I could see what a movement that could be. And then when somebody gets out, to be able to find meetings and to be able to incorporate that as well. Yeah, it's, it's no secret. It's like grown so big, this program, this way of doing things. And it's still a nonprofit, right?
Right.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, I get a lot of core cards in. I don't know about Ebony, but I get a lot of core cards.
We
signed,
do too. Yeah.
And a lot of nudges from the judge, and a lot of people that get referred to us to Smart Recovery from their therapist.
Yeah, I could see that too. And we at the meeting space, we get a lot of nursing students and counseling students. Like, we get a lot of that because they're supposed to get exposed to all the different types of meetings. Do you get that as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love the movement that's going on in our society of people wanting to have more tools and learn and be more helpful. I mean, God, you can just look at it. It's just, we're so caught up in just this positive momentum of healing and helping, and now there's programs for teens and young adults, and they're in campuses. Smart Recovery is in campuses, and over at APG, you guys have Smart Recovery incorporated into alternative peer groups, and that we did a whole episode on. So if you didn't see that, go back. But in fact, we did a couple of episodes on that and No Hero and Heroin, and that's very, very powerful too. We'll definitely talk more about that. And Smart Recovery is also in a lot of the psychiatric hospitals now as well, and has been useful in helping veterans with PTSD. And so, wherever you're at in your belief of a higher power, or whether or not you want to consider yourself an alcoholic or an addict, whatever's helpful, I really appreciate that Smart Recovery takes a Switzerland attitude about some of the hotter topics and is neutral, because ultimately, isn't this all about trying to be as most helpful as possible and joining with each other and not letting, all these little silly, differences alienate ourselves from getting the help that we need?
Right.
So that's really beautiful. I love how focused you guys are and how it's obviously important to you that you're doing it. I'm very interested. I'm very much going to be looking into this personally because I feel a yes inside me for this, and as I know intuitively I have been steered to learn these types of tools intuitively, so there's anything's different because of that. I had to be willing because if nothing changes, and I saw my parents, and I knew that I was definitely worse, and I wanted to be I wanted another chance, and so if you want another chance to have a different life, take the baby steps, do what you feel is right for you, and if you feel like anything from the show has helped you to maybe want to give that a try, it's free. There's meetings in Las Vegas, and there's going to be more. You could even become a facilitator. I recommend going to one first. Just saying,
Nice.
One or two.
just whatever. You can become a facilitator. You can go to the website. Do you happen to know the name of the website off chance?
If you're looking for a meeting, you can go to meetings.smartrecovery.org.
Okay, and if you're looking to become a facilitator, I'm sure there's a link on there to get to that as well. But it costs like about $100 to become a facilitator, and
Self-paced.
yeah, that's really wonderful. And yeah,
And there's no obligation. If you want to go through facilitator training, you don't have to have a meeting at the end. So you can just learn the tools
you could just
on your
learn
own.
it.
Yeah,
You could just learn it in a more focused way.
right.
And,
Just
That's
like a
wonderful.
boot camp for the tools.
and so, is there a background check as well to become a facilitator, or is that not
No.
even? Okay,
No.
that's very interesting. You're not really taking any authoritative role. You're taking a guide role. You know,
Right.
you're trusting in everybody's innate ability to be self-honest and to ultimately care and take responsibility for their own healing. And that's wonderful, because nobody needs to be overly dependent upon another person either. And how does that help a person if there's one person who has all the answers and everybody else doesn't? You know, like ultimately we do have the truth within us. It's about whether or not we are willing to be wrong and find out what our truth really is, what resonates with us. You know, and you can get there in a myriad of ways. But the most important thing is to recognize if there's something that's not good, that's not feeling right in your life, something's eating your lunch. Maybe have an open mind and try another thing. So yeah,
Yeah, I always tell people there's as many ways to recovery as there are people in this room. You know, you're just gonna have to find yours.
which doesn't really work when there's only 2 people in the room, but yeah.
Well, then there's 2 ways.
There's 2 ways. Unless they're listening to a lot of voices, then there's many.
Oh, and then there might be 2 in the committee.
The committee. So yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else that you want to add that maybe hasn't been said, or do you think we covered everything?
We covered a lot in an hour.
Good.
So when somebody goes to their first meeting, what do you recommend they do when they come to their first meeting?
Just keep an open mind, and just if you want to just listen, just listen. If you want to share your story, share your story. If you have a problem, you can share that too, and just bring yourself. That's all. That's all we ask.
No
And
judgment.
do you ever pass
Bring
like
it
a
on.
basket around, or is it just free?
We
At
do
Foundation.
pass-
You guys do baskets.
Yes, we do.
At FFR, we do it for free
Okay.
because we're autonomous.
Right. Okay.
We don't have to pay rent. So.
Gotcha. So that's amazing. Okay. So if a basket was passed, it would be just to pay for expenses, and that's it if they needed to for the
Right.
facility that they're actually at or something. or-
Right, right. And if people didn't want to donate, then they don't have to donate.
So if you are a facilitator and you want to have it someplace, how do you approach the place to have it there? I mean, don't you need to then, like, let's say you are at, you have to like pay for the room somewhere. How do you pay for the room somewhere if you don't pass a basket? How does that happen?
That's a
Does
great
SMART pay for it, or do you
No.
just not, or do you just find places that are also nonprofits, like the meeting space, that are willing to like do that? Like,
That there's a lot of online support for that and national support for that.
to pay for the room, or to find places that to host these meetings that are not going to charge for the meeting to be there.
I'm not going to.
I will.
I'm not going to speak to pay for the room.
Yeah.
But to speak to support starting a new meeting, there's a lot of support out there. Like I know here in town, Rick Kapliski and Bob Vickery, and Ebony and myself, we're more than willing to help you out and help you get moving. As far as buying literature goes, the beautiful thing about SMART is that it's online. It's I think the handbooks are what, $11?
Yeah, $11-12.
$11-12 online, and if you really need one, I'm sure there's someone that's
Right.
got one laying
That'll
around.
give you one. Yeah.
I guess I was just thinking from a perspective of, which that's really interesting too, is that if I was to go become a facilitator and I wanted to rent a room somewhere, I would then have to pay for that room, right?
Well, we advise people to go to, like you were saying, a nonprofit or
Right. To
maybe
partner up.
a hospital or something that will give you a room.
Right.
And, let them know that who you're
This
with.
is what you're
and-
doing.
Right.
Okay, yeah, that's all I wanted. Totally selfish question. Okay.
And as far as literature goes, I think everyone on Earth has a smartphone now,
Right.
and the Smart app is amazing.
Okay.
And all
So
the
you don't
tools
even
are
need
on
to
there.
buy it. You could just see it. Yeah.
I do highly suggest getting
Yeah.
your own handbook.
Yeah.
Better to
Especially
have
if you wanna
the
write,
pen and
yeah.
paper, like the brick and mortar meetings,
Yeah.
pen and paper in hand, is always super strong. But in a pinch, digital works pretty good.
Thank you guys so much. This has been way more informative than we all even thought we were going to end up talking about. And that was so cool. We went into all the details of it in such a way that I just, I'm so grateful. So thank you. Thank you so much. And please remember that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them and do not represent any 12-step program, should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. And you can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, on Amazon Fire TV. You can listen to us on the PHLV Radio app. You can get our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeart Radio. Thank you for joining us today on The Real Recovery Show. We would like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLV Radio, here in Las Vegas. See you next week.